So good morning to everybody. Thanks for joining me. And I'm just going to do a little bit of an introduction, and then I'm going to come to all of your questions, because I know your questions are going to be different and they're going to be unique to you. My name is Olive Hickmott. I'm a health and learning coach. And in the last week, several people had said to me about their ADHD children and how they were struggling with them at home. And so I thought, well, hang on a minute. We work with ADHD and we work with literacy and all of the neurodiversity. So let's have a little workshop here. And this is just what I would call a mini drop-in workshop. And to just give you some ideas that you may not have met before and to enable you to share your experience. So it's very practical, and it's nothing about the diagnosis of ADHD or literacy. It's about what you can do. As I say, I'm a health and learning coach, and I think that's what we need, is to be able to coach these children with the exceptional skills they have. So the first thing I'm going to do is to help you understand the experiences of non-dyslexics, which is where my story started, because I had really poor literacy as a child until I was 50, when I discovered how people who were good at literacy did it. I had no idea why I was having so much trouble with literacy. And then we're going to do a little bit about learning about your own visual strengths and the benefits of dyslexia. And then we're going to do a little bit about exploring your mental imagery and making friends with your mental imagery, because everybody's got mental imagery. And I'm this person that talks about mental imagery all the time. And then we're going to learn about how to visualize words and numbers, and how you can take these skills into other things like reading, spelling, comprehension, and handwriting. So that's more or less what we do. And so I'm just leaving everybody on stopping their videos at the moment, so that I can just use the recording of this without worrying about confidentiality for you guys. My journey went like this. I've been working with neurodivergent students for the last 20 years. And I started with dyslexia and dyscalculia and ADHD, and I was exploring their mental images all the time. And so this little red blue box down the bottom here is about the learning differences. And I don't call them learning difficulties, I call them learning differences, because at last I think that is catching on, that these are just people that are learning differently to the way they're being taught. And I always explore their strengths. That's the first thing I do. What is it they're good at, and how do they do what they do? So, for example, you might have somebody who is like Tom Daly, diving off the 10-meter board. And what he's doing is, before he's even gone up on a 10-meter board, he's rehearsing that dive hundreds and hundreds of times in his head. And that is through his mental imagery. So if you ask, and if you take an easy case, if you ask somebody what they were doing at school today, or what they were doing last Christmas, whatever it is, you will find that they've got good mental imagery of what they were doing at school. And you will notice this because their eyes move up. So if they're saying, oh, there was a problem in my class this morning, and you see their eyes moving up, you know that they're watching the problem in their class this morning. And you can add little questions in. For example, like, well, what's the teacher wearing today? And so you can encourage them to use their mental imagery to answer questions. And in my experience, all these neurodivergent kids have got amazing strengths. They're really creative and they're really imaginative, and they're doing that through mental imagery. And when I first learned about spelling in one of my NLP training courses, one of the lecturers said to me something that was always stuck with me. If something doesn't work that we've just taught you, don't give up on it. Explore it, work out why it doesn't work, and make it better. And that's what I did. So I learned about mental imagery, and I was exploring it with kids. And I found that not all of them had got stable mental imagery. They tended to move around all over the place. in point of fact, some of them were so fast, it was like a rocket ship going straight through. And then I learnt that the best thing to do to stabilize mental imagery was grounding. That I was making progress. And so we were working with dyslexic kids and having really great success. But then we also found that some of them really felt very unsafe when they came in. And so safety became a big issue about making and helping them talk about their strengths, help their safety. But safety could still be a problem for some of them. And so why were they what was causing them to be so unsafe? And then I came across the concept of breathing and how people who breathe through their mouths can become really stressed. So the best way to breathe is in through your nose, down into your belly, and out through your nose again. And there is lots and lots of theory about that. And so we discovered that breathing, if they were breathing better, they became better grounded and they could stabilize their mental imagery better. And then there was one more piece of the jigsaw puzzle that was sleep. And so I started learning about sleep for myself because I wasn't very good at sleeping. And I explored sleep and discovered the huge connection between sleep and ADHD and between breathing and ADHD. And so those joined my kit bag, if you like. So that was my journey, and that's how I connect all the learning differences with all this list of strengths, mental imagery, grounding, safety, breathing, and sleep. And once you've got to the top of this tree here, once you've got sleep under control and breathing under control and safety under control and the students are grounded, then their mental imagery is much better and they can use their strengths. So it works both ways, this little tree. I'd just like to share with you one other thing about brain activity when people can't sleep. If their brain is too active to sleep, which is typical with people with really good mental imagery, they then become too tired to concentrate the next day. Then they can't make sense of what's going on in school, whether it's words or anything else or numbers or anything. They then become stressed and mouth breathing, which is their sympathetic nervous system going into overdrive, which reduces the oxygenation in their brain, which causes them to go hyper, and then they can't sleep at night. So it goes round in circles. And my big thing over the last 20 years has been mental imagery, really. And if I just show you this picture about the connections between learning difficulties and mental imagery. So you've got poor literacy and they're not picturing letters and words. And we know that if people are not picturing letters or words, they are not going to be good at literacy and they are going to be diagnosed dyslexic. In 20 years, I've met thousands of dyslexics. Not one of them was picturing words successfully. If you're not picturing numbers, you're going to be struggling with numeracy and probably diagnosed dyscalculic. The ADHDers are really interesting. I love people with ADHD because they have amazing mental imagery, but the only problem is their middle name is distraction. If you're talking about the Eiffel Tower, they've moved on to the centre of Paris. Now they're on the cross-channel ferry. Now they've gone to London. Now they've gone to Arsenal to watch a football match. So you're still, within seconds this happens. So you're still talking about the Eiffel Tower and they're at a football match. No wonder they seem distracted. And the other big group is the Asperger's and autistic group and sensory overload, where basically they're being deluged with mental imagery. And even somebody who is, for example, is dyslexic can suddenly get deluged with mental imagery in exactly the same way and do sensory overload. And the autistic crew would rather sit in a corner and play with their toys and look at something in great detail so they didn't have to concentrate on all this stuff happening. Almost nobody on the planet is talking about mental imagery. And I'd just like to show you a little picture of your brain. And here is your brain, here is your neck, and here is your eye. There is a little place at the back here, just above the dent in your neck, called the occipital lobe. that's where you keep all your pictures. So if I say to you, picture an elephant, then you're going to the occipital lobe and you can then describe what your elephant looks like. This is an incredibly important place, and it's the source of much confusion over mental imagery. But this is where all your mental images lie. And if I just show you how it works for literacy, when you're little, you start to access the meaning of a word. So you might recognize your name, for example. A little bit later on, you'll access pronunciation and articulation. So you'll be able to start pronouncing words and you'll be able to articulate sentences. Then when you see a word, what you're being taught in school is phonics, which is fine. It's part of your brain, the front and the top. Talk to each other and work out the word when you see a new word. What should happen is that that word flows down into the word form area, which is right next to the occipital lobe. So that after you've seen it about 2 or 3 times and done this with it, then you should be able to just recognize it. And then you want the fast track to recognize it. You don't have to continuously break up into phonics. You want to be going for fluency. So that is how it works in your brain. And that's me. Thank you for joining me. I'll talk to you now. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about specific questions. So please start giving me your questions either in the chat box or come on video.